Hour 2 Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Brian Hayes, Jamie Noodles, McLennan. We got Brad Treliving coming up here in just a moment, GM of the Maple Leafs. The Leafs only made one deal today. Connor Dewar is a Leaf. He's a depth forward coming in from Minnesota. Canadian kid, I think Manitoba kid, played in the WHL. And he's coming up. Not a big guy, but he's can fight. He's kills penalties, and like penalty killing is an issue for this team right now. You know, Dewar is a guy. We'll see how much he gets used. Edmondson will undoubtedly be used on the penalty kill. Yeah, and you know, beyond that, it's Dewar today. It was Edmondson yesterday, and it was Lyubushkin, I guess, earlier in the week or late last week. Yeah. So you get three guys, depth players, not massive impact players. No, but what the Leafs decided to do was not give up a lot of big assets to add depth to their group, and this is what you're going to get between now and the playoffs.
And, you know, I think that's where Brad Treliving is comfortable with his group, saying my top players have to be my top players. My depth guys, the guys that I brought in to kind of add to that top group where it's Bertuzzi, it's Domi, Yarncroke is on term. Nyes. You know, Robertson is the one that's, you know, he's a guy
still here.
He is.
Yeah, he's still here. And, you know, we'll ask Treliving about it, like what went into that decision. I'm sure teams were calling on him. Yeah. I'm curious how he feels about it. Like, they sent him down to the Marlies. He's still down there.
Yeah, I think there was a paper transaction with Nyes.
Nyes could go down in order to make, I'm guessing, Dewar work. And then once you get beyond that, there's no, you know, ramifications in terms of how many guys you got up and, you know, the cap and all that kind of stuff. Like, Nyes will be playing tomorrow night. He's going to be reactivated. Because Brad did say that in the last hour, that by all accounts, good signs after he left the game last night.
It's a big collision. That's it.
That was a big collision. Yeah, but that's Marchand, and of course it's him. I said the same thing with Liljegren. Like, of course, when the Liljegren injury got, it's 63, and he's just the easiest guy to hate in the world unless you're a Bruins fan.
He's just in there,
yeah. He's just constantly in the mix, and he's going to be in the mix come the playoffs. Yeah. And, you know, Leaf fans.
I'm not convinced the Leafs are on a collision course with Boston.
You think it still could be Florida, or they could drop back to a wild card spot?
I still think it could be Florida.
Yeah?
I think that's going to be a seesaw battle right through the rest of the season. Now, I haven't, and I should look at strength of schedule for both of them because, you know, obviously health, all of that type of stuff. But watching Florida, I think they're a serious team. I think Boston's a serious team. I think they, you know, the way they play. But I'm not convinced that Florida's just going to be the team in the end at the top.
No, I mean, I will say this. I'm looking at their schedule right now. They play Boston 2 more times. Boston twice.
There's the decider right there.
Exactly. In Florida, March 26th. At Boston, April 6th. That's probably going to determine what happens. Yeah. One of those teams win both those games in regulation. That's who's going to end up winning the division. If it splits, who knows? But, you know, beyond that, and anything can happen at any time. They've got Calgary on Saturday night. I'm talking about Florida here. But they come down the stretch. Games against Montreal, a couple games against Ottawa, game against Columbus, game against Buffalo.
Right.
Like, if Florida can get a couple, like 2 or 3 points, if not 4 points against Boston, they should cruise coming home. Doesn't mean Boston won't win games down the stretch, too. Right. But what's interesting is the last game of the regular season for Florida is Leafs-Toronto, April 16th. Like, the Leafs could factor in
who they play.
Let's say it's tied at that point or close to it. And it's like, if you beat Florida, you play Florida. If you lose, you play Boston.
So we had this off-air chat with Gino. Is it the PWHA has a format where you can choose your opponent?
Yeah, PWHL, yes.
Sorry.
The first seed team can pick either the third or the fourth seed who they want to play.
I've got a buddy who's playing in Italy, and it's the same thing, apparently. You know, his wife was telling me, because our kids go to school together, she said they were, like, whoever wins the division in Italy, like, could choose
They get to pick whoever they want. You've
been talking about that.
I like that
imagine,
idea.
like, the Leafs are at the end of the season, and I think the Leafs played Tampa their last game. Or Tampa's last game, but
yeah, I think they go Florida, Tampa, then they're done.
Could you imagine if it is tied and the Leafs are like, okay, we don't want to play.
Pick our poison.
Yeah,
here,
we
man.
don't want to play Florida here, or we don't want to play Boston at that point. That might be the strength of the team you send down there or play that night.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got load management written all over it. But it's kind of like what happened in Game 7, Boston, Florida, where it's like, we want Florida.
Exactly.
Watch what you wish for.
Careful what
you wish for. The fact is, both teams are really good teams.
Yeah.
Both teams are going to be favored, and deservedly, because of where they're going to be in the standings. They're going to have home ice.
Yeah.
Whoever it is, Leafs, Bruins, Leafs, Panthers, those teams are going to be favored, not substantially, not like,
no, but based on either. Well, let's see
what they've done all year and home ice.
But let's see how this season. Like, pretty much every team has about 18 to 20 games.
Yeah, give
right?
or take. Yeah.
So
and the Leafs have a tough schedule still. Yeah. Like they still have games against Carolina. They got Edmonton coming into town. Jersey, we'll see what comes of that. They play Tampa a couple more times.
Yeah.
They play Florida 2 more times. So the Leafs, they're gonna have challenges down the stretch, but they're obviously in a very good spot. And they made one deal today. Connor Dewar is coming in, a depth forward from Minnesota. We know that Joel Edmondson was acquired yesterday, and Ilya Lyubushkin was acquired late last week. So those are the 3 moves of substance that are NHL players that are going to step in and to chat about the trade deadline and what he's seen out of his team recently and what he can expect out of his team moving forward. We're joined now by the GM of the Maple Leafs. Joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline, here's Brad Treliving. How you doing, Brad?
We're doing good. How you doing, gentlemen?
Yeah, we're doing okay. What's life like for you now that we're 2 hours removed from the trade deadline? Obviously, you got to talk to us here for a bit, but do you decompose? Do you get right back into it? Do you fly to Montreal? Like, what's your schedule look like post-trade deadline?
Well, we're going to hopefully not decompose.
Okay. Oh, yes, decompress.
You're going to decompress.
Decompress. Thank you for it's been a long day here.
It's been a long day, yeah. No, you're just sort of cleaning up. You spent those. Obviously, you're going through all the deadline stuff, but you spent the last few days with the scouts, and you're looking at, you're putting in plans in place for the summer in terms of guys that we may want to keep an eye on over the course of the final, months of the regular season going into the playoffs. So a lot of planning, but for the most part, the manager's job now. You grab a coffee and you sit up and you watch, so we'll get a chance to meet the team in Montreal tomorrow. I tend to try to get out in the scouting trail a little bit. Once you get past the deadline, whether it be through the Marlies, going and watching some of your own prospects, getting a look at the draft eligibles. So a lot of the heavy lifting really leading up to the deadline is done, and now you watch your team.
Well, in terms of the acquisitions made in the last week that are NHL players, you brought in Connor Dewar today, a forward. You brought in Ilya Lyubushkin and Joel Edmondson. With those 3 moves, take us through the decision-making on that and how and why you think your team is better today than it was a week ago.
Well, as we you spend the year, you're evaluating your team, right? And certainly there was some things that we identified as areas that we'd like to upgrade. Listen, there's always, you see it every year, and there was some big moves today that you'd call signature moves. We look at everything, and the things you always have to balance is what is your need, what's the availability, and then what's the asset requirement. And sometimes those all match up, and sometimes they don't. And as we looked at it in terms of the big game hunting, if you will, we quite honestly we felt there's some holes in our roster to fill. And as we went through the process, we weren't going to be able to fill them all. So then you start looking at it and saying, at a reasonable price, where areas that you can shore up, spots that you think that can have an impact. And right now, we all know our defense is an area that we're trying to continue to upgrade and improve. We all know it's on the right side of our defense. Those options weren't there for us that made sense to us. So that you look at different opportunities, and adding Ilya and adding Joel, are two big bodies. Both to me can help in our penalty kill. Both can make us harder around our net. Two areas that we want to address. I think you get into games at this time of the year, and you get into the playoffs, which we got to get in first. But I think they can be valuable commodities when you got size, length, and physicality on the back end. So excited to add both those guys. And then, as we got through that, you continue to look at is there possible tweaks on the blue line, but we were hoping to add a forward up front that could, again, help us in areas that we need. And one of them was our penalty kill and somebody with a, sort of a defensive conscience. And if we could it be a center iceman? I don't think, when you look at the premier positions, to me, it's down the middle of the ice. You got center iceman, and your defense are really where you try to build your teams, and I don't think you can have too many center icemen. So we're excited to bring Connor on board. He's a really good penalty killer. He's a very competitive kid. Good in the face-off dot, and just gives us more depth down the middle, and it gives us some different options that Sheldon can deploy. So, I know sometimes it's not the sexiest moves, but again, you go back to it. What's your needs? Are you able to fulfill and fill those needs at a cost that is doable? And when all things settled, this is what we felt made the most sense at the cost that we paid.
Tree, now that the deadline's done, do you actually address the troops and say, hey, this is what I believe is the formula in the room, now you guys go do it?
Yeah, you know what? I wasn't with the team here the last couple of days. We just stayed hunkered down here in the office and worked out of here. But I will talk to the team when I get back around them. I talk to them, leading up, not necessarily right around the deadline, but before. And the message is we want to help the team. We weren't looking. Listen, if there's trades that required different moves, we were prepared to make them. But our goal was to add to the group. But the message from me was, and again, like I said, I've been involved in bigger deals where you add, like I said, whether it be higher profile players and whatnot, and so certainly not opposed to that. But the bottom line is, the heavy lifting for our group is going to come from the guys that are already in that room. When you look at how we're going to get to the place we're going to get to, I really felt at the end of the day, and again, when you take into consideration what was available to us or what costs and whether we were A, prepared to meet that, or B, had the assets available to meet it, it just didn't make sense to me that it wasn't going to move the needle without, more than the guys that are in that room getting to the levels they're capable of getting to. We've got star power in our team, and they've got to lead the way for us. We've got to then support them as best we possibly can underneath. So the message to the group prior going into, we're going to try to help. We're not trying to take away from the team. We're trying to add to the team, which I think, as you know, Noodles is a player. Everybody, players like when they can get some help. But let's be clear in the messaging that I feel we've got enough in here to get to where we need to get to, but it's up to the group that's in here, and we have a belief in them. And now we saddle up here and get ready for the last 19 games and get ourselves in a position where we earn a playoff spot.
With Brad Treliving, and you're relatively new here, Brad, but you're up to speed. I mean, I think a lot of Leaf fans would hear that answer and think, okay, we've seen Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Riley. They've been here a long time, and in the playoffs, they have not been able to prove that they can get it done in the past. So what have you seen that leads you to believe that they can this spring?
Well, and there's a long list of guys that haven't necessarily got it done till they get it done, right? So what leads me to believe that they can get it done is they're really good players. They're driven to have success, and they've skinned their knee in going through playoff experiences, and you hope each of those experiences fuels them to have success as they go forward. And I know they've taken experiences out of whether it be regular season and playoff experiences they've had to date. So it wasn't that long ago that they were talking about Steve Yzerman at a time not being able to get it done, or Alex Ovechkin not being able to get it done, and all sorts of players that are stars in the game and have gone on to be Hall of Fame players. Until you get it done, you haven't gotten it done. And to me, it's a matter of getting back and knocking on the door year after year after year until you can push through. But I got a great deal of faith in this group, and like I said, if we can help them and tweak some things to give our team the best possible chance, that's what we tried to do. But you look around, and I don't care which team you're on, the top guys lead the way, and everybody follows suit behind them. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to watch this group down the stretch. And like I said, we can't get ahead of ourselves and sort of talking about playoffs. We've got to qualify, and we've got some heavy games in front of us. And but part of this next 19 games I think we're at is earning a playoff spot, but also getting your game in order. We played two games against Boston this past week, who's a playoff tested team, and there were some real good things, and there were things that give you a good slap on areas that you got to be better at. So that's what you use these next 19 to is forge a path and earn a spot in the playoffs. And get your game in order and in a position that you can have success once you get there.
I know it's a busy time. We appreciate you doing this. Go decompress, Brad, on your way to Montreal, and we'll do this again down the road. Thank you for this.
You bet. Take care, guys.
There's Brad Treliving joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Yeah, listen, believes in the big boys. They've invested in the big boys. That's the mantra. That's what they've done here. They've brought in a few players that are going to play, like Edmonton's going to play, and Labushkin's going to play. And I think Dewar will, if he's not going to play every night, he's certainly an option, and we will see him play down the stretch run, and we'll see if Keefe finds a role for him. But I don't have an issue with that philosophy. I don't. I think at some point you're going to have to put up or shut up the best players. Do they have the deepest roster in the league? No. Are there other star players that collectively make a core in other teams that feel probably better about what they're supported with? Likely. But it's not like it's a mess after the top five guys. It's not like you just have a bunch of rookies or guys that are 39, 40. You have other support staff here in Toronto.
You got other options.
And at some point, yes, it may get simplified to Matthews can't play the way he played last night, right? Marner can't play the way he played last night. Willie can't toe drag in Game 7 of the playoffs.
They looked lethargic last night. You could tell.
And against Buffalo, something's going on. I think there's a
Buffalo was a dog of a game.
That was an awful game. Game. And I mean, Buffalo played last night in National, and by all accounts, it was worse.
Really?
Buffalo's just a virus going through the league. They play, and people are like, oh, man.
Yeah.
But, the Leafs, I thought they were pretty flat against Buffalo. I thought they were flat the way they started, but I will give them credit that, they fought. Literally and figuratively, they fought. They were pissed off. They showed some life. But Boston's a
game like that.
That's the thing, man. You got to drop the puck and be like, I'll fight anybody right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to knock you out before you get a chance to knock me out.
Yeah. Just be interesting to see if you start that way, how is other teams going to react? Because you got to back it up. That's the thing. You got to can't just play like that one night. Mm-hmm. The playoffs are like that for months.
Yeah. And every night you got to be out.
Drag it into everyone into a war. But your
and
top
you can't
players
be silly either. You can't. It's not. You can't be goofy and taking penalties.
No, but your top players have to be your top players. And I say this all the time. They have to be able to step out of their comfort zone. And out of their comfort zone is, hey, it's a big block shot. It's absorbing a hit where usually they find a different route to maybe go in and avoid contact. Playoffs, that's not the case. You're going to get hit. You're going to have to block shots. You're going to have to do the small details to win. And Tree always has these great analogies. Well, they've skinned their knee.
Mm-hmm.
They've taken their lumps. Well, they got to find a way. But they might. I guess the question is, and this is probably for the fan base, and we're going to watch the next 19 games. Is this team better suited to be playoff ready? Like that's, a little bit more bite, a little bit, bigger on the back end type of thing. That's where I think they've decided to go.
And I think that's the right play. I think it's certainly worth a shot. I think that's where Bertuzzi and Domi and even Reeves come in, and they were acquired in the summer, and now Edmondson and Lyubushkin, they come in. But I have an answer on those guys. I don't have that answer collectively on the best players in terms of their ability to play with bite and fight through everything and piss off the opponent and be comfortable when it gets intense. Yeah. Like that's probably the best way to describe it is I thought last night it was intense early and their best players were uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's where, like, Pasternak is not a big, tough, fighting, smack-talking guy, but he's comfortable in any situation, plays with a low pulse.
He's learned that, right?
He's learned that, exactly. Patrick Kane, the same. You don't win 3 cups unless there's guys swinging at you and guys trying to drag you into a war. And Showtime said, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and you go ahead. You chase me around. I'm going to make you look stupid.
Yeah.
That's the example we're talking about with Matthews, with Marner, with Nylander. It's like you got to be comfortable even when it's nasty, intense.
That's true.
And they got to prove that they can do that. Yeah. It's not change who you are, not change your DNA. Just be comfortable playing through any possible atmosphere.
Yeah.
And
and we won't know until they get.
We're not going to find out until we get there.
Yeah.
And again, it's been 7 years. We've had 7 answers, but the beauty of pro sports, the beauty of life, is you're going to get another opportunity. Yeah. And you can always rewrite history, and you can basically rearrange and redefine your own reputation. All right, Chris Johnston coming up. We got some Blue Jay news, some Joey Votto, your boy. Some news on him, some Tiger Woods news as well. We'll tell you about that. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 online, tsn1050.ca. All right, trade deadline continues here on TSN 1050, brought to you by your Ontario Subaru dealers. Subaru, confidence in motion. Trade deadline now is officially behind us. 2.5 hours behind us. Yet Chris Johnston, nice enough to stick around and join us in studio. CJ in studio for the first time. You've never been in here.
I didn't even know how to get here.
That's wild, man. Never been in here.
Never, walked by here and been like, that's where OverDrive is?
Literally never.
Amazing.
I've been over in the old That's Hockey studio. Obviously, been in Studio 6, our main studio, but never been.
Good seeing you.
I couldn't get back here, by the way.
I know.
Chris was nice enough to escort me over, but if not, I'm lost right now.
It is there is kind of a maze vibe. It takes years to figure it out, like how you get to Studio 6, how you get over here.
Follow Gino has arrows written. I don't know if you know this. Gino Retta has arrows written on the walls. To
get back and forth, I've never noticed that, no.
So from Sports Center all the way to his studio, which was That's Hockey, and then Studio 6, there's these black little arrows that you can follow.
Did he personally put those on the ground?
Wrote them on there. No, it's not on the ground. It's on the wall.
You're
little
kidding
arrows.
me.
Wait, Gino Retta was on this network when I was a little kid.
I know.
And I got gray in my beard, and he still needs...
Well, no, he doesn't need them now, but I'm saying, when I was walking with him one time, he was like, follow these arrows. So I don't know if he actually put them on there.
All right.
But there is black little arrows on the wall, and it takes you kind of all of a sudden you're on the goat trail and you're through this door and you're in a studio. I don't know if he laid breadcrumbs years ago. It's an amazing little, trail that he's created.
All right. Well, there you go. Follow the trail. Next time you got to get over here. Are you a winners and losers guy on a day like today? How do you react to, the news? And obviously it's not just about today because it's been happening 2-3 weeks. We've been building towards this, if not longer than that.
Yeah. You know why I don't do winners and losers very well? And it's not because I'm worried about ticking someone off I'm so locked in all day long. Was that a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick?
Yeah.
And salary retention. I'm never seeing the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if we talk on Monday, I could probably think about it better. But in the moment, I find it really hard to conceptualize what everyone did. I mean, it's sort of obvious on a day like this.
Right.
You got Carolina and Vegas making probably the biggest set of moves in the last 2 days here, but it's hard to say. I mean, how's that going to work out? I mean, Vegas is even in the playoffs for sure.
That's wild.
That's actually the wild thing here. Everyone's freaking out about it. It's like, imagine Calgary catches them at the line and
be incredible. Bill Foley might fire everybody. Just fly in on his helicopter, say you're gone, you're gone, you're gone.
That's
possible down in Vegas.
It is.
They operate.
Everything is on the table when it comes to Vegas, but you're dialed into the league. Was there one particular thing that you had your eye on and it just maybe didn't come to fruition? Whether you don't have to tell the teams or whatever, but were you getting a sense that there were some big deals behind the curtain and it just didn't happen and might be pushed to the draft?
Yeah, it sounds like there was multiple teams that were talking about, not traditional deadline moves.
Right.
And, Boston certainly had a lot going on in this week. I put out there a few days ago the whole, Elias Lindholm conversation they had that didn't obviously manifest itself. It seems like they had some discussions with LA, maybe about Pierre-Luc Dubois. I don't know a lot there, but they were obviously looking to try to address a hole at center and potentially for the longer term.
Right.
And they weren't able to do it ultimately, and they end up sort of having a deadline a little bit like the Leafs. I mean, it's funny, Bruins and Leafs on a crash course for each other in the first round. They were two of the teams last year that were splashing all over the place, first-round picks, getting the big names on trade bait lists, and it was a little bit more modest from both teams ultimately. And there was a quote, too, that I saw John Davidson said in Columbus where he was saying the Blue Jackets were in on a lot, but they felt like they should actually let their next GM make the call on some of that stuff. So,
hard.
Do you know what's? I will say this: I'm a little hopeful because we all like trades, right? This is good for business because we're now coming out of this period where the cap's going to actually go up this summer. There's a few huge files around the league, whether it's what happens with Markstrom in Calgary. Right. You've got Mitch Marner heading into July 1st where he can extend. You've got Leon Draisaitl in the same place. We got Steven Stamkos might be a pending. I could just see there's a lot sort of boiling, and finally teams are going to get a little bit of cap space because the cap's going up after all these pandemic years. So I actually think the draft this year, it might be worth being at the Vegas Sphere. Like I think it really sets up as an offseason of pretty potentially explosive one.
Well, we've talked a lot about the Leafs, and we just had Brad Treliving on, and Brad's answer effectively was we helped their team, we added to our team, but we were believers, him in the front office, that what they had was going to have to be good enough. In other words, their best players are going to have to drag them there. We're topic of discussion in this city for a long, long time. Yet you mentioned Boston didn't do much. Florida picked up a couple veterans, Tarasenko and Oposo, household names, but not who they were 5, 7, 8 years ago. Tampa didn't do much. Detroit didn't do really much. So it's like the 5 teams from the Atlantic that are likely going to the playoffs, they didn't really make massive changes. Like, what do you make of that division considering how deep it is? And likely five of those teams are going to the playoffs.
Well, and you can expand it to the East. I mean, obviously Carolina is maybe the outlier, but the Rangers were in a lot more. They end up getting Alex Wenberg, a few other role players, but it was a Western Conference arms race.
Yeah.
I think some of it is just cyclical. A lot of these teams have been buying, and like the Lightning, the Panthers, the Leafs, the Bruins, all are out of first-round picks. I mean, I know Toronto ends up holding on to its 2024 first-rounder, but these teams have been big buyers at multiple deadlines. So I think some of it's that. And, certainly from the Leafs case, I actually understand this deadline. The reality is there weren't that many what I'd call really good players that changed teams today. And I'm not throwing shade at anyone, but, there wasn't a lot of certainty out there. Mm-hmm. And so in the face of that lack of certainty, I think it makes sense to get some players with maybe a little more defensive acumen that can hopefully improve their penalty kill, which is obviously a bit of a sore point for the Leafs at this point in the season going into the playoffs. And I've been of this view the whole time. Like, it's funny, Jonas Siegel, I know, is on the show all the time. Like, when we're off air, we're always arguing. Like, I feel like Jonas has this idea, and I'm sorry to throw shade at Jonas if you're listening, but like that there's a perfect team. Like, I don't think there's perfect. I'm like, if you're built this way, you're winning because of these guys, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the goaltending has to hold up, and those guys have to carry them through. And they haven't been bad all the playoffs. I mean, they got them through the first round. If you look at the point totals for the top players on the Leafs last year and the big goals, and then it dried up against Florida, and there's not a lot of secondary offense. So I think the Leafs are in the same boat a year later. Maybe it's different. Maybe they can keep spreading them across 3 lines rather than 2. But ultimately, It's Matthews Marner. I mean,
Yeah,
Riley,
exactly.
it's really.
I agree. Jonas and I have gone at it countless times over the
But Jonas
past few
always
weeks.
feels like there should be an all-star on the fourth line. I'm like,
Right.
it just doesn't work that way. I mean,
possible.
Tampa won a cup. I think it was the Bubble Cup. I think I mixed their two up, where they had almost nobody else in the lineup scored. Like they had one killer line in Hedman, and that was it. Like that, you go down the list, and there's no offense below that. I'm like, well, but look how great those guys were. I think that's how the Leafs are built to win.
Well, they're going to have to because there's no other moves to be made. What about the teams that absolutely did zero, that are kind of on the cusp? Like, think of the Islanders, like a team like that, where it's like you're looking at it and thinking, you fired the coach. Are you going to be proactive to continue to add? And it just, nothing came to fruition. Did you even hear that name? Did you even hear the Islanders in on anything?
Nothing. I mean, I'm sure Lou was making calls, but
Yeah.
no, I mean, they were quiet. Detroit, similar spot. Now, to the Red Wings' credit, look, they brought in Patrick Kane this season,
Right.
in
Like, they
season,
made their moves.
and he's been good. They've made some improvement internally and obviously taken a step, but they were a team that I think was around some players, didn't make it happen. I mean, look, if we're doing winners and losers, it's easy on this day to be like, oh, these guys did all this stuff, they win, and the ones that did nothing. I mean, last year, the teams in the Stanley Cup final, like Florida didn't do much at the deadline last year.
Right.
I know Vegas made a nice move. Barbashev might have been the move looking back of the deadline last year, but in general, that wasn't an active deadline. But then we go 2 years ago and Colorado loaded up, made a whole bunch of trades in the weeks leading up.
Looks
So
like they
every year's
loaded up
different.
again this year.
Yeah.
Colorado.
Exactly. I mean, every year's different, and like Florida looks really. There's 6, 7, 8 teams like there is every year, and I don't think the Leafs I wouldn't put the Leafs in that position right now, the top 6 or 7, but they're just on the outside. They could be 8. They could be 9. Like, it's not like we're talking about a team like
they're 16 or
that's
18
just going to backdoor and they're going to have 93 points, and they're not really going anywhere. And this week, they didn't make any decisions on what they were doing based on those 2 Boston games, but they weren't good. Like, it didn't go well for the Leafs.
The nation's not feeling good right now.
No, the nation, considering where we were on Monday, coming off that really fun win against the Rangers, they had just won 7 in a row. I know they lost that streak against Vegas, but going on the road through Vegas, through Colorado, they had won a lot of games. They were playing really well. They seemed to have some mojo, and it hit a wall this week, which happens over the course of a season.
Of course, and it's a back-to-back situation. It's tough to read too much into one game, but you're right. There's a pattern here against the Bruins here in recent history. They haven't had much success, any success this year or last year. I liked some of the pushback in that game. I mean, this is another thing Jonas rats on me for, but I don't mind a little bit that. I think that playoff series is going to be like that, right? I mean, the Bruins just went and got Patrick Maroon today. It's not because I know they want the luck of his cups or whatever. But he's not coming in there as a troll doll. He's there because if they get in that kind of game, I think he's going to maybe not suit up the whole series, but at some point. And so I don't know. I don't think that is really going to matter. I mean, Boston's just a hard place to win.
Yeah, it is.
There's no way around it.
Man.
But if you play them, it's like the Tampa situation. You got to go through. If you're going to win, you got to go through good teams.
Right.
They went through and they got through Tampa. If they play Boston in the first round, they've got to find a way to get through them. And it's internal. Last year, it was internally. These guys, if you look at it, if we had to go back, I don't have all the games at the top of my head, but, to beat Tampa, I don't think it was the guys they acquired at the deadline, was it? Or was it their top player?
Yeah,
O'Reilly had a good
was
series.
big. Yeah,
Shen had a great playoffs, I thought, too, for the Leafs last year.
But, Matthews and Marner, they were good.
Yeah.
AT in overtime, game 6.
Nylander,
better than Vasilevsky.
JT,
Riley was great. Great.
The guys you have in place, but that is a team that you got to get through.
Yep.
Tampa was a team that they had to get through, and they finally found a way. Be the same situation
and
on both
sides.
Boston,
it's Florida.
I was just going to say,
Florida
got you last year. Boston's had you. You got to find a way to get through them.
And if you're sitting in Edmonton today, you're going, whoa, they might play Vegas in round 1, depending how it goes. If they want to go far, they're probably going through Colorado at some point. I mean, this league, it's tough. I mean, you can get a good bounce. The odd team does get a good sort of an easier path through, but there's no easy path through. I mean,
Well, Chris Johnston in studio, like the three Western teams that are going to the playoffs, they've all been very active. Vancouver got out in front of it, acquiring Zadorov and then Lindholm, and then obviously Edmonton picked up multiple pieces, including Adam Henrique. Winnipeg today, they go in and get Tyler Toffoli. Like, I had not seen him linked to Winnipeg. I had seen him linked to Vancouver, Vegas, Carolina, a couple of other different teams. But, like, what do you make of those, three Western teams and how active they were and maybe how they feel about their chances now, considering what you just said about how many other good teams are in the West right now?
Yeah, Winnipeg's, maybe a surprise is strong, but I didn't see that coming either. And when you step back and you think of how they start the, training camp, the big extensions to Scheifele and Hellebuyck that really didn't seem like it was going to head in that direction. They extend Nino Niederreiter, who was a deadline pickup last year in December. They make the Monahan deal at the All-Star break and give up a first-round pick and then go get Toffoli, Colin Miller, for depth on their blue line. I mean, that's an all-in kind for a team like Winnipeg. I mean, they're it's not that they're afraid of giving up those picks, but they know they have to be a draft and develop team. They're not in the mix for free agents every year. And so I love the verve there. Edmonton, they identified their guys and just got it done, right? They had sort of a fixed amount of cap space. They were comfortable giving up their first-round pick. They got it done. I think today was pretty quiet. And, I mean, if you look at the underlying numbers, that might be the best team in the league in the regular season. I know they're
playing great right now.
Yeah, it's such a crappy start to the year, but beyond basically middle of November on, like, no one has performed better than the Oilers have. And so, I think that they had to get just a little bit more in their lineup, right? I mean, they rely so much on those top two lines, and hopefully those moves are going to help them do that.
Yeah, they did lose to Columbus last night, but other than that,
I didn't.
Tampa lost to Calgary.
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to watch that game. It just looked like the Oilers came out flat.
Yeah, they were.
And watching the replays, like, some bad mistakes, some passes through the middle that looked lazy. It looked like they kind of were like, we're in Columbus.
We're playing Columbus. We're good.
And they'd won, 5 in a row or whatever it was. And that's the thing, though. I think they're in Buffalo tomorrow. And Buffalo is probably going to be in one because they'll be crabby.
Yeah.
Right? And McDavid broke through the 100-point mark, did he not? I thought he did last night.
I think Hyman's goal, wasn't it? Hyman scored again last night.
Hyman's on the way to 50.
He's gonna cruise past 50 the way he's going.
If
he's
he
had,
stays healthy.
44 goals or something.
That's the other thing. But
what a story.
A lot of these teams are just adding to the depth of their group. Like there wasn't a team that you look at today and go, okay, well now they're a contender. They weren't a contender before today, but now they are.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They were contenders before or on the cusp, and then what they did is added to the depth of their group. Like Colorado, I thought was interesting because they were very active, like some of those trades I thought were really like changing the dynamic of the team. Ryan Johansson out. Casey
second line center out.
Exactly. Like you're out and that's it. And then Philly waves him. Like I thought that's a bold move. Now Johansson's a unique guy. Kind of I guess a step down from PLD in LA, but can be a physical force when he wants to be, but kind of a sleeper.
Yeah.
And that's it. We've seen enough. You're out. And, I don't know if Casey Middlestad is the answer there, but they've seen enough that they like him in that spot. And Bowen Byram's a good player. He can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing.
That was a different trade, right? That was a 1-for-1 young, like center for defenseman. That's kind of a throwback trade almost.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. Because Bowen Byram's a skilled player. Like Adam Larson was that stay-at-home, kind of Chris Tanev, kind of block shots. And Taylor Hall goes and wins the
heart in Jersey.
It's tough. That's a tough look on our buddy there from, what was it, Chiarelli.
Yeah, Peter Chiarelli's still trying to figure that one out.
Chiarelli can still hang his hat on the Draisaitl deal because he got Draisaitl.
That was a great contract. And won a cup in Boston.
Right.
Like ring, he's got the ring.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, too, Chris Johnston with us, the teams that have been on the outside of the playoffs for quite some time and weren't overly active. And I look at Ottawa as a great example. Like Ottawa, they moved Tarasenko, but they really didn't do much. Montreal finally moved on their goal. They traded Jake Allen to Montreal or to Jersey. Still have David Savard. Like those are two teams that have known for months they're not making the playoffs. They're not very good. They have their different plans because Montreal was aware this was coming. Ottawa was not. But what do you make of their deadlines as we look back on it now?
I think Montreal, it's almost the reverse of what I was saying about the Atlantic teams and buying. They've just been selling for so long. they're running out of things to sell, right?
Right.
Whether you go back, it's the Sherratts, they've traded Edmondson. I'm talking about past deadlines, even Toffoli back when they did that. They're at a point where everyone that they might want to move, whether it was David Savard, obviously they do move Jake Allen. Those guys all had one more year on their deal, so they weren't typical rentals, and I think that held them up. It was also a buyer's market, right? So if you were selling, it maybe wasn't the best time to be selling, and I think that's where Ottawa comes into with Jacob Chychrun, for example, because they're in a position where they might be selling him on pennies of the dollar of what they paid just to bring him in from Arizona. I think that's a fair statement at this point in time, unless the market really swings. And so they elect to hold on to him, but there's a decision coming. I mean, you've got Shabbat and Sanderson signed long-term. It's 1 year out, one more season on Chychrun's deal. Even, Eric Brandstrom, I know there was some action around him today. The Senators didn't move him, but they've got a bit of a glut that they're going to have to address. And it was not a good day to be selling. I mean, the teams that did it were doing it at the tip of a spear, right? Like even the trade of Tarasenko, I know he has a no-trade clause, but he wants to go to one team. So, I mean,
that makes it tough.
Well, when you look back on it, that's where, I mean, if you want to get tough on, having more action in the league, these no-move clauses have really jammed up.
They're crushing
a lot of situations, right?
It's not. So I actually wrote a story with this at The Athletic this week. There's something like 280 players with some form of no-trade protection.
Yeah.
The NBA has one.
Yeah.
Bradley Beal is the only player
Which is
with
crazy.
a no-trade clause. Apparently there's been 10 ever in NBA history. Like LeBron has never had a no-trade clause. And no offense, we could go to any roster and pick a guy and be like,
absolutely,
he's got trade protection?
Yeah.
It's absurd. You have third-line players. You have fifth defensemen in the league who are like, I'm not going there. And you're like, you play 11 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And we have to ask your permission to trade you for a compensatory pick?
Don't you think that in the next CBA, that's probably, wouldn't you go after that? Like, if, that would be, if you want things to be a little bit more free-flowing at the deadline, there's your...
Or you use, like, baseball's got the 10-5 rights, which you got to be in the league for 10 years and you got to be on the same team for 5 years. Once that happens, you have full control of your career. That makes a lot of sense. You're a veteran and you've been with the same team for a long time, which means you're probably, your family's set up, your kids are in schools, you bought a house, whatever. That, I understand that. But the idea of, Tarasenko, I'll come up there for a year, but no move for Tarasenko for one season in Ottawa. It was crazy.
They were clearly chasing the name value of him, right? At that point, it's like they just want to have a splash. But it's look at. I feel these players negotiate it. I mean, if we're going to aim the, who are we pointing at? It should be the teams giving them out, the GMs making that decision. And this is ultimately, to me, not to take this in a total different direction, but this is what happens in a hard cap league, because you have, say, Florida or Tampa signing, Brian Hayes, you're a great player on our team. We're going to need you to take a little less, and we'll give you that no move.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But like in a world where maybe it was a bit more of a free market where the players could earn what they can make, I don't think you need those clauses quite the same way.
Yep.
Right.
Yet that's not going to change. Hard salary cap. They're not moving on that. Not going to happen. CJ, great
when
stuff,
I'm commissioned for a day.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bringing it in.
I would do the exact same thing. Great stuff, man. Good seeing you. Follow the arrows to get out of here if you have to.
I'm going to find Gino's office at the end of that rainbow.
Actually, Gino texted us. Did you get that text?
Yeah, what did he say?
The 100% true story. I use a Sharpie.
I love it.
There you go.
Is that where the TikTok studio is, at the end of that arrow, or what?
I don't know where.
That's a good question. Where it could be, because he's got that TikTok office, man. He's knocking out videos that are going viral every single day, man.
I didn't know that. There's a TikTok office for Gino?
Well, he's got it. I think it's just his own office. Yeah. But he knocks out vids, man, and it's like unreal.
All hours of the day, he's just TikToking.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And,
he's probably doing one right now.
Social media
probably
star.
is.
Love it.
He probably is. All right, CJ, good seeing you, man.
Yeah, you too, guys.
Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. Mail-in Fridays brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. From tip-offs to tie bites and puck drops to pizza, BP's elite lineup of apps, wings, and ice-cold beers always dialed in for game time. Hustle into your local BP tonight. No one's mailing it in around here today. Lots of trades during Trade Center. Also news outside of the NHL. Joey Votto agreed to a non-roster invite with the Blue Jays today.
Yeah.
And he's been doing the rounds, like begging for someone to bring him into camp. He wants to keep playing. He's 40, left-handed bat. He's going to be a DH. He needs to accept that. I think he will. He doesn't have many options.
Veteran guy, though. And
a Toronto guy. And, There's Joey's laugh, man. The weird thing about Votto is he's been very open and honest about. He's from Toronto. I think he loves Toronto.
Yeah.
But he's never been like wanting to be Mr. Toronto or Mr. Canadian baseball. Like that's never been in his personality. And now if he ends up making the team, that's how they're going to bill it. It's going to be, hey, the Toronto zone is coming back. Like, is he going to be comfortable with that? Is he going to completely change his tune and be like, no, I've always dreamt of being a J? I've never heard him suggest he was dreaming of being a J.
No, never. I always felt like he would just be, kind of just a one-team guy.
Right, Cincinnati Reds and see you later.
Like, away you go. But now he's going to have to. And he's going to have to play that narrative and say, I'm coming
always
home.
Wanted to play at the Rogers Center.
Yep.
Yeah,
I love it up in Toronto.
Love it, man. Love being back home. That was his response when we asked him, hey, when you're in town, will you go see the Jays play?
Yeah, that was his response.
And just a maniacal Bond villain laugh.
If we get him on like multiple times, not the first time, but we should bring that up. Do you remember laughing at him?
Remember laughing in our face on radio when we suggested maybe you'd go check out the Jays play when you're in town. But listen, it has the potential to be a really cool story. The guy's he's one of the best hitters of the last 20 years in Major League Baseball. The guy's he very well could be a Hall of Famer. Right. He's that good, and he is from Toronto, and he's a left-handed bat. We'll see what he brings down in Dunedin. But that's pretty substantial news today. Joey Votto being invited to show up at camp. Non-roster guarantee, but he'll be down in Dunedin, I believe, as of tomorrow. Final hour coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.